So I wanted to make this one a little bigger. It's funny that actually this kind of working in rings is just such a common thing in quilts. Anyway, it's an easy way to grow a small piece by continuing to add around it, especially if you're adding rings of similar things around it. It just becomes a natural growth pattern, like a tree. And I also did something here where I stopped using the same size square. In terms of, I want to talk a little bit more about this with the holding pattern quilt, but I use something I call 1, 2, 3, which is really picking a size to start with, and then doubling that and making it a piece that's twice that size, and then tripling that and making it 3 times the size. So you have 3 options to work with. You can put 9 small ones together and get a 9 patch. You can put 3 long 3s together, and you can combine them in different ways, and they always kind of fit together, which is, from a practical standpoint, if you're approaching patchwork from a making do and using what you have kind of thing, it's a handy thing to have, to use different size scraps, or also to build just a solid color. If you've only got small odd pieces to work with, you can sort of mix and match them and make a block of color. It also, oddly enough, gives the patchwork a kind of random order. And it's not something you can always plan. It reminds me a little bit of why we think Boro is so nice, which is the end result of making do with what you have creates this sort of surprising pleasingness. It just works and you don't know why, but I guess you just get a sense of how it's been configured, and it has its own form. So I like to do this because I do work with so much small scrap, and in this case the next ring I added it has kind of a free form to it, even though it is very exactly pieced. And I will add another one too, because what's happening here is I'm adding space around the figure with the thought of creating a longer view. And at the same time, I'm sort of creating a story here. So those colored moons have become sort of symbolic of a sense of time. Maybe they're colored because maybe it's autumn and it fits to that. Many autumns past, perhaps. But now the outer rings are kind of empty. And I like that idea because it puts the figure in the context of something larger. And I've X'd out and marked kind of a cross here, which very often I use in the center of the 9 patch, but in this case, since the face of the figure is in the corner there, I've kind of shifted it over. And I've X'd out a couple of the moons here because I think I'm actually going to replace them with the indigo darkness there, so that I can create both a path horizontally in the line of vision, and then also a path vertically through the face of the figure and actually the heart of the figure, which would be directly beneath the head. I like this cross thing that goes on. It's kind of creates a path for something. And in this case, I might utilize that path to put some additional stitching in. I'm not sure. Also, you see the last remaining part of the ring hanging down there. When I add that thin cloth to the back to add body and something for the stitching to grab onto, I often leave the edges loose so that I can still add pieces in this overcast method because it's not, stitched down all the way to the edge. And in this way I can continue to grow the piece and then continue to add pieces of thin cloth to the back with that invisible glue stitch. And actually, at one point I might show you, you can also add backing, a permanent backing this way as well, in pieces, starting with the center and working outward. So that way you don't end up at the end with a large piece that you have to back and quilt. It's much harder to get at. So this one, maybe I'll even call this Consider Rings, since the rings themselves now have opened up, I would say, opened up a space for this figure to look out into and maybe expand its thoughts in some way.